with episode number 60 of the Yakking Show. And we've got an interesting day. For the 5th of November, we've got spring temperatures of about 18 centigrade and something like 65 Fahrenheit, which is unusual for this time of the year. But we're not here to talk about the weather. We just enjoy the good stuff. So we're here to talk about life, business, and more, where we bring you tips and ideas for the changing world we're living in. And everything's changing, including the weather. So we have another interesting guest for you today, a very talented person, but it's not my job to introduce our guests. So I must first welcome Kathleen. Hello, Kathleen. Nice to have you on the show again.
Hello, Peter. And it's always great to be here. We have such fun together, don't we?
Absolutely.
And, thanks to all of you for tuning in. We so appreciate you, and we love reading your comments. So do please keep them coming. And of course, if anyone out there is interested in becoming a guest on our show, please don't hesitate to reach out to either Peter or myself. And as Peter said, yes, we have an interesting guest with us today. He's, how shall I describe, very multi-talented, and we'll get into that in a moment, but his career has spanned, oh my gosh, ranges from being a stand-up comic to doing voiceover work for a cartoon for CBC. He's a musician, a very talented musician, and now is the president and partner of a local printing company called Reeve and Company. So welcome, Steve Ashton. Welcome, Steve. How are you today?
Wow. Well, now I'm quite full of myself. Thank you for asking.
Hello, Steve. It's good to see you.
It's great to see you, Peter. Thanks for having me here.
So, Steve, I've just given the audience a little bit of a snippet into your career, but please take us back. Tell us how this all started, and now you've got a printing company. So, I mean, I'm interested in your music, and I'm interested in hearing about your stand-up comedy, you know, being a stand-up comic. So just tell us more.
Oh, my favorite topic. Perfect. So I years ago, I developed a great big interest in advertising and in people, in trying to find out kind of what makes people tick. And you know, that's a big part of advertising too, is finding out what they respond to. Mm-hmm. So I started off my career in an ad agency, you know, starting at the bottom, writing copy, designing some ads, went on to be a graphic designer for another company. And to make an extraordinarily long story short, a printing company called me up and called me over to the dark side to sell printing for them. And I knew enough, having dealt with a lot of print salespeople, I had found what I didn't like. And so I could hopefully turn that experience around and become the type of salesperson that I'd want to work with. And it seemed to go relatively well. And about 10 years ago or so, I joined up with Reeve and Company, and about 5 years ago, my business partner and I, we let the Reeves retire, and so he and I purchased the company from them.
Good,
and moved
you let them retire.
Yeah, they deserved it. They are two of the nicest people I have ever met, and they deserve any success that they've had. And they quietly built up just a really good business based on service and based mm-hmm. on kindness and understanding. And so our hope was that we could take that and we could use it to build on that and expand our client base, but keep the same level of service and the same sort of personal level. So yes, I can talk about, you know, times where I've done stand-up or times where I do music or what have you, because at the end of the day, we're all still people, whether we're running businesses or whether we're purchasing or whatever it is, we're all still people. I posted something the other day that, and I think it said something like, you know, commerce is transaction, but business is people, mm-hmm. right?
Right.
So that's a little 2 cents worth about me.
Thanks for sharing that. On to you, Peter.
Okay, so I've found out a little bit about you, and we want to talk more about the stand-up comedian in a moment. But with that range of activities that you've done, from being comedian, musician, selling print on the dark side, as you say, you must have picked up quite a lot about knowing your audience. And this is something I think you have a lot of advice for our viewers and listeners. So you want to talk more about that?
I'd love to. I'd love to. And whether it is stand-up, and I'll be perfectly honest, I did stand-up as a passion and as a love. It was never a career. Same with music. Music has always been a passion and a love, and so I perform fairly often. But the career is here, and it's fantastic. But in every case, the same principles apply of knowing your audience, knowing who you are speaking with or who you're trying to speak with. And that can mean a lot of different things. From a printing perspective, that can even come down to what substrate you're printing on. And that might sound strange, but years ago I had a nonprofit organization, and we were quoting on a mail-out piece for them. And their exact quote was, "We don't really care what this costs. It just can't look expensive." Right. So even though the glossy paper was the same price as the silk or the matte, they said, we need to go with the matte because it gives off the impression that we are spending less on our print. Because their audience are people who are donating, and they were aware of the fact in a high-tech, high-touch world that when people are actually holding a piece of print in their hands, they're not only looking at it for the content, but they're judging it based on, is this too flashy? And if it is, we don't want to support that organization necessarily because we feel that they're spending too much of their money on marketing and not enough going to the people who actually need it.
Who need it, right?
So I have a question then for you, Steve. Now that makes sense to me in printing, but as a musician, for instance, how do you get to know your audience when you're on stage? And I mean, you could have a very huge cross section of people in front of you, from maybe teenagers, I don't know, to the middle-agers.
And old people like me, yeah.
The silver fox speaks. Yeah.
There you go. The whiskers of wisdom.
Oh, thank you.
That's what we've dubbed them. But do you have an answer for that, Steve, or some advice for that? Like, how do you determine your audience?
So I think that's a really good question. And my answer would be, I think, two-pronged. One, if you can, is to ask the right questions. Perhaps if you're up on stage as a musician, you can't necessarily say, hey, what do you guys want to hear next? But if you're interacting and you're doing a sales call with someone, and you want to find out what their sensitivities are and what their triggers are, asking those questions, like, is there a reason why you would go, talking about our last example, is there a reason why you would prefer to go for a gloss as opposed to a lamb, or a gloss as opposed to a matte, or what have you? So, then you can, and then the most important part is listen, which is sort of the second prong of my answer, which is when I'm up on stage playing, I'm looking around the room, and I'm seeing, okay, that table there seems to be responding quite well to this song, or these people are tapping their toes, or and again, it's a question of knowing what your role is as well. Because if I'm playing at a banquet and I'm just meant to be background music, then that's all I'm meant to do. That's all I'm meant to be. So know your audience, also know your purpose. But if I'm performing where I am actually supposed to be commanding the attention of the room, so to speak, then yes, I have to be aware of what's going on around me. And, you know, maybe I play a country song and maybe that gets people up and moving. And, you know, whereas maybe, you know, historically country has not been my forte, but maybe learn a few more country songs, or maybe play a few more country songs that night if that's what seems to be moving the needle, so to speak.
Interesting. Now, if for businesses trying to know their audience, quite a few businesses have suddenly had a huge barrier put between them and their audience, and that's because of the restrictions with the virus and the reaction and the shutdowns and all that. So I guess we have many businesses that are in this gray area of how do we listen to our audience, how do we ask them questions, and how do we see their responses when we can't get in front of them. At best, we're going to see them on a Zoom screen like we're doing now, or on an email or phone. So now there's another layer of complexity in this thing. So how do we handle that one, Steve?
So I would say that not only do we need to know our audience, but know our potential audience. So here at Reeve & Company, we have historically focused on business-to-business sales. So our clients are by and large corporations, ones who do events, ones who have vehicles that they need wrapped, or ones that, you know, will need a retractable banner stand or trade show booth or anything like that. What the pandemic has done to our business has shut down all events. You know, it's essentially put the university work on hold as well. So we've had to look at, you know, who could our audience be? Well, we know just from paying attention to what's happening in, you know, in the stores nowadays and in the world nowadays, is that a lot of people have been focusing on home projects, home renovations. So perhaps instead of us being so firmly entrenched in our minds that, well, we are only a business-to-business business, that we can expand and we can be business to consumer. And I sort of draw the analogy to a radio station. So, you know, if you want to hear talk radio, then you can put it on 570 News. And if you keep it on there all the time, that's all you will ever hear. However, there's a different audience out there, and there's a different broadcast frequency. And maybe you open your mind up to listen to country, or maybe you open your mind up to listen to hard rock, which means you have to then tune into a different frequency. You have to adjust what your messaging is to try to reach the people in the other potential markets. So I don't know if that's a great answer to your question, but that's sort of where I'm coming from. Is there are still a lot of people out there who presumably need what we do. One of the things that we do is custom printed wallpaper.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it comes in handy for companies that want to put a big display up on their wall and reinforce their corporate message for their staff. But how awesome would it be if you could actually do your own custom printed wallpaper in your house, and you could feature your pet or your kid or your favorite place? Like, if you can't go to Cuba this year, why not splash a little Cuba on one of your walls, right? Or something like that, which again, for us, we have to get out of our own way,
right,
and put our egos to the side and say, okay, we are not only one thing, we can be many things. We can broadcast on different frequencies.
Right.
So in getting to know your audience, is there a process that you go through in like, if you have a new customer or potential customer, is there a process that you go through even mentally to try to gain some insight into what they need? Is it more documented? Like what is it that you go through to try to get to know them? Is it just having an open discussion, or do you do a little research about them?
So yes, is the answer to all of those questions. Yes, there is a a process that I go through in my brain. Yes, we ask the right questions. You know, the fact that we have had the benefit of a number of years experience helps us to help our clients, because we are the experts in our field. And I don't say that in an egotistical way. I just, you know, from an experiential standpoint, we have dealt with a lot of these questions in the past, and hopefully we can use that experience to help guide our clients. Now, what I've found over the last number of years is people tend to do more internet searching right now, and they will come up to you with specific questions. Like, for example, I need a price on a banner stand, and I need it to be 33 inches wide by 79 inches tall, and I'm going to be ordering 2 of them. Please get me a price right away. And the temptation is to say, okay, this is the price, right, here you go, and then follow up in a day or 2 and say, how did we do on the price? I think that the magic ingredient that we're missing in that scenario is we don't really know if that banner stand will suit their purposes perfectly. So oftentimes, if I get that in an email, I will call and say, hey, or I'll send them an email and say, can I call? And so I call and say, I know that you've been asking for a banner stand. Can I ask what you're using it for? And, oh, well, we're just putting it up in our lobby and we're leaving it there. Okay, is there a reason why it would have to retract? Oh, no? Okay. On the flip side, you know, why are you using this? Well, we go to 25 trade shows a year, back when there were trade shows, but they will come back at some point. So okay, if you're going to 25 trade shows a year, you can assume that this is going to be put up and down at least 25 times this year. So would you like to have the cheapest thing possible, or would you like something that's guaranteed to work? And those are very, very different questions, because especially with something like a banner stand, more than anything else we sell, I find you get what you pay for.
Yep.
So if you want, you can buy something that is super cheap on a not very good material, which will curl. I don't know if you've seen this in the past, where you're walking through a trade show and someone has a banner stand and the vinyl is curled on it.
Yep. Yeah.
I know most people would walk by and probably not pay much attention to it, but it actually gives me goosebumps. And oh, it drives me crazy. And I think it's because I had the history in graphic design and in marketing. So I'm very, very protective of my clients' brands. And when I look at a brand like that, without even saying anything, your banner stand is saying for you, we don't really care about our brand.
Yep.
And that, ugh. So again, now all of a sudden we're having a conversation and we're finding out what the pain points are and what we're looking for and why are we looking for that. And maybe you don't know exactly what it is that could serve your purpose. Like maybe a pop-up fabric wall might suit your purpose a little bit more than a banner stand, or maybe something that you know, that's just stationary as opposed to a retractable. So in answer, this is a very long-winded answer to a short question, but when you ask the right questions and you have a good, meaningful dialogue in an honest and authentic manner, then you will get an honest and authentic response back, and you'll be able to separate yourself a little bit from being just a commodity to being someone who's providing a solution.
And I just have to jump in one more time, Peter. I'm curious, because of the world situation right now, are you getting any requests for anything unusual that you wouldn't normally do? For instance, Peter and I were thinking, well, you know, wouldn't it be neat to have like a privacy screen behind us when we're doing Zoom calls? And with logos, maybe. I mean, that's not something that you see every day, but I mean.
No, absolutely. We have been asked for exactly that. We've been asked for retractables to put people's messages on. We've been asked for pop-up fabric walls to put people's messages on. We've been asked to do vinyl logos on the wall behind them, and then that way it's a permanent fixture. I was in seeing a client on Friday, and they're revamping their boardroom, and they're adding more lights in one area and dimming them in the other, so they can have you know, a TV projection over there, and then the camera, so that behind them will have a big vinyl logo. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's happening a fair bit. Plus masks and PPE and all that sort of stuff that we never got into before.
Right.
Yeah, we'll need to come and talk to you soon about that one. I've got to endorse what you're saying about retractable screens and you get what you pay for. I belong to an organization, I won't name it, which had weekly meetings, and it was part of an international organization. So occasionally there was a conference or whatever, and we took our banner was pulled up for every weekly meeting, and it was taken to the conference. And we were short of money in a little club that we had, so we didn't go for quality, we went for economy. And I think after a year of being pulled up every week, the thing started curling. And then at one important meeting, it jammed and we couldn't get it up. And then once we put a bit of force on it, we ripped it at the bottom. So it was a total disaster. So yes, you're absolutely right that you need to look at the application before you.
But it's interesting too, because something, I'm sorry, I'm pointing at you here because I'm all excited about banner stands now. But getting the economy version of something doesn't mean that you're not being smart about things. So one of our banner stands comes with a 3-part pole.
Okay.
What one great thing to consider if you have one of that is design it so that it would work if you only use one of the 3 parts, and that if it makes sense if you use the second of 3 parts, and then of course the full 3, which takes a little bit of forethought, but it's such a great way to save money. Sure. Because now you can use it as a tabletop display, you can use it as a floor stand, and it gives you that extra bit of flexibility that maybe you wouldn't have thought about before. Oh. So again, that's where it comes to the asking the questions of, you know, is this something that's important to you?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit before we run out of time and jump ahead. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. If someone who was just finishing high school, given all the changes in the world that's going on right now, given someone who's just finishing high school came to you and because of your success in so many different fields and said, Steve, you know, I don't know what to do. I'm finishing high school. I don't know whether I should go to university. I don't know what course I should look at. What advice can you give me? What would your words to them be?
Wow. That's a doozy of a question. I guess I would start just by asking them what their interests are, you know, and you know what makes them excited, what jazzes them up. Do they have an idea right now of the direction where they'd like to head? So one thing that I would definitely tell them is to say yes to opportunities when they come along.
Right.
So years ago, I through a friend of mine, when he was getting married, I met a couple of his friends who said, hey, we're doing this little project for our website. It's a little cartoony thing and you do a bunch of goofy voices. Do you want to help? And I said, yes. They said, it's never going to go anywhere. It's just a silly thing for our website. I said, okay, no problem. That thing ended up becoming a show that CBC ended up buying to make an extraordinarily long story short, for 65 half-hour episodes and 2 feature films. Wow. And it was incredible. But just the fact that, you know, you don't look at the outcome, you detach yourself from the outcome. You don't say, well, you know, if it's never going anywhere, I'm not. No, try it. Try it. Yeah. If you have an opportunity to do something, especially if it scares you, and I'll be completely honest with you, before every gig, I am a nervous wreck. I walk around coughing and gagging all day. before every stand-up performance, before every voice record, before this podcast, I was walking around my office. Because you have to be pushed out of your comfort zone a little bit. You have to say yes to opportunities. So young, just out of high school kid, do that. You know, try to think of what it is that you're excited to do, and then try. And then just, you know, what's the worst that's going to happen? You know, you're going to discover that you don't like it. Mm-hmm. You know, don't expect to be great at it right away, because they're you know, it's that 10,000 hours thing that Gladwell talks about. But just go there and enjoy the process and learn as much as you can and say yes to any opportunity you can.
Thanks. Good advice. Good advice.
Yes.
I think I stole your spot on the question list. You had something you wanted to ask, Steve.
No, I'm actually, you are so talented, Steve, because I've watched you perform. You have a great voice. So obviously you're still getting gigs. How do people reach you if they want you as a musician? Let's just say.
Well, I will give my email, which is steve@reeveandcompany.com. And everything is spelled out like REEVEANDCOMPANY, reeveandcompany.com. So steve@reeveandcompany.com. You can get me there, and you can ask about printing or voice or music or what have you. And I don't know how much time we have left, but I will tell you one quick story if I can.
Yes.
Carry on. We got a few minutes.
Excellent. So when I was 19, I booked some time in a recording studio, and I was going to apply to the post-recorded music program at Fanshawe College, and they needed a demo tape. A friend of mine knew someone who was in this. It was a very big, very professional studio, way better than I was. And they agreed to have me in there. So I went in there and I played, I think it was 4 or 5 songs. And afterwards, the guy, the engineer, this guy whose opinion I respected a lot, came out and said to me, "Your guitar playing is pretty good." I said, "Oh, thank you." And he said, "Your songwriting isn't bad." I said, "Well, thank you very much." He said, "Don't sing. You're not good at it. It's not for you. You shouldn't do this." And I said, okay. And I didn't for a long while, for years. Till I went to go see a friend of mine play, and she completely threw me under the bus. She said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I just am getting over laryngitis, and I'm sorry I have to take more breaks than normal, but Steve Ashton's going to play for you. Everyone's here for him." And I was like, "What are you doing?" And so she did. She totally, trial by fire. So I got up there and I played 3 or 4 songs, whatever it was. Probably not well, but here's the thing. No one threw anything at me. I got, you know, a liberal smattering of applause at the end. And it was at that point I thought, you know what? I can do this. And maybe I'll keep going. And so that's part of the reason why, getting back to Peter's question earlier, or getting back to just, you know, talking with young people, we need to foster an environment of encouragement and collaboration. Like music, for example, is typically so full of ego. If we can strip that away, then it becomes a collaboration and not a competition. Yep. Right? And that goes the same for business. For me, I personally believe, and maybe it's Pollyanna-ish, but I believe there's enough work to go around. That you don't have to be the bad guy. You know, I think nice people can finish first. Right?
Absolutely.
And so
absolutely.
If you offer, if you give of yourself, if you promote kindness, then people, I feel, will respond to that, and they will pay it forward.
Yep.
You know, Steve, Peter has a similar story to yours. Peter, why don't you share it with Steve?
very, very quickly, my dad played clarinet in a British Army band. This is way back because he's long dead. So there was some musical talent in the family. And when I was about 10, I started doing music at our primary school in Rhodesia, as it was, which was a British system. English teacher took music and singing, a very fierce Scottish lady by the name of Mrs. MacLeod. And after the first class, she said, "Peter Wright," I can remember her words like it was yesterday, "you are absolutely useless. You will never sing, you will never play a musical instrument, and you won't learn to play music. So when you come next week, bring a book and I'll give you a stool in the corner because you are disrupting the rest of the class." So I was 10. So I went through my life believing that. And then when I had a heart attack at 60, and at about 64, 65, I needed a big goal. And I was past running marathons and all that sort of thing. So I said, what's impossible? Learn to play a musical instrument and read music. So I went and bought a guitar and tried to teach myself on the internet, not very well. Took music lessons, and I played a couple of things in church, and I'm not good. I'm terrible. But, you know, when I think back, I lost 50 years because of what that woman told me. But then it was the motivation to prove her wrong. So I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying.
Good for you. Good for
Thank
you for sticking with it. I mean, yeah, it may have taken you 50 years. It took me 25 years to get up on stage as a stand-up, because I first went out at 17. I saw a show and I went up to the manager and said, "How do I get up on this stage?" And he said, "You write me 5 minutes of good material and I'll put you up on the stage." And I tried, and I knew that what I wrote was poop, pardon the French. And I never did. I never did. And then finally at 42, I
did it.
I got the chutzpah together to try it, and it went relatively well. Good. For the most part, most of the time. And then a colossal bomb, which is a story maybe for another time, but holy smokes, it was a colossal bomb. But it also makes for a good story, and it kind of shows that you're human. Like, we're all learning here, right?
Of course. I know we're running over time, but that doesn't matter. This is so good. I've got a last question, if I may, Kathleen.
Sure.
All that you went through in the 25 years of trying or thinking about being a stand-up comedian, once you did it, and with your music, did you find being up on stage in the glare of that spotlight and in the harsh glare of the audience, has that helped you in your business life, especially when it comes to sales?
Oh, I think so. I have never had a problem with speaking to people. However, this was more of an exercise in pushing yourself way far out of your comfort zone, which is lovely. So, you know, you're standing in front of a closed door and about to go in and make a sales call. That's pushing you out of your comfort zone. You're looking at the receiver on the telephone and it looks like it weighs 400 pounds. Pick it up and start making the call, and you get pushed out of your zone.
Good. I think I'd love to keep going. We're going to have to get you back, Steve, for another episode somewhere in the near future. But I think we've got to call it a day. So I'm going to hand over to Kathleen. She does her her big bit at the end here. Over to you.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you so much, Steve. This was a lot of fun. And as Peter said, we'd love to have you return on the show. So thank you very much for joining us today. And thank all of you as well for tuning in. We do appreciate you. And as I said before, please keep your comments coming. We read every one of them. And if anyone out there is interested in becoming a guest on our show, please do not hesitate to reach out to Peter or myself. And until next time, do take care, stay safe, and bye-bye for now.